Pokemon Gen 4 remakes just got announced? We already got the perfect remakes right here. That's right. So yes, finally the inevitable Gen 4 remakes got announced. After years of being bombarded by stupid clickbaity fan theories and fake rumours where YouTubers would never shut the hell up about these, they're finally coming. And while a lot of people are giving the upcoming remake some mad jerk off, I really am not excited about these remakes. And no, not because of the graphics. A lot of people are so one-dimensional and dense that they're judging the game purely based off the graphics alone. But regardless of graphics, I genuinely feel like remaking Gen 4 is utterly pointless and a waste of time and just a cash grab. I'm expecting nothing pretty much, so I can't be disappointed at all. At best, the remakes will be a serviceable yet pointless remake of a game that didn't even need one, and at worst it'll be a complete bastardisation. In this video I'll be explaining my reasoning for this in detail, but I want to go in depth about the general idea of remakes in general when it comes to video games. Why remakes are bad, when remakes are done well, and when they're just unnecessary and nothing more than a cash grab. Resident Evil and Final Fantasy are probably some of the best examples to talk about, but those will be relevant to discussing Gen 4 remakes. Remakes usually are made to either take a very old game that is very dated and to bring it back to the modern day scene by updating it significantly. Usually technical stuff like graphics overhaul, fixing broken mechanics, etc, making it playable in the modern day standards. A great example of this are Final Fantasy 1, where the original one was a complete dumpster fire made decades ago, literally made of some rinky-dink 1980s toaster with graphics so bad that you can't even see what's happening properly, and being so broken and unfun that the average person would not play this game even if they were paid to do so. But the remake drastically changed this. Though the remake is now far from a great game, it's at least definitely playable, looks decent enough, the soundtrack is now tolerable, and a lot of the broken mechanics are now fixed, so it's no longer trash. But then there's another kind of remakes, reimaginings, remakes that not only update the original but also really try to change it in the process, making it something new, usually by adding new integral gameplay features or changing the plot to something else. Final Fantasy VII Remake definitely falls into this category, and boy, I've got a lot to say about that fucking remake. But it really did try to change the original plot to be something completely different, and by changing it, I mean completely ruining it, what was originally a masterpiece, but whatever. Pokemon have done several remakes by this point that fall into both of these categories. Fire Red and Leaf Green and Heart Gold and Soul Silver were good remakes that took the original games that were broken dumpster fires and made them not garbage to play. I know people get butthurt, but even Gen 2 was horribly designed, and though it was sort of playable, the balancing was so horrible and stupid it might as well have been broken. A Gen 2 game with hardly any Gen 2 mons in it, most of them are absolutely trash with absolutely no reason to use, like flipping Sentret and Spinarak, and most of the new Johto mons that were even worth using were only available in the post game, where at that point the game was pretty much over anyways. Also, the game was stupidly easy. Badge boosts and the dumb EV system combined with an absolute meme-tastically bad boss design, so pathetic and lore breaking that you could easily wreck the fucking champion who's supposed to be the strongest trainer in the game with a team of shit level 40s, hell even lower. Heart Gold drastically changed games, so it's at least slightly balanced, though it still has a lot of the original flaws. Bosses are still pretty dumb, balance is still a bit off, and grinding is still atrociously unfun to do. But at least it's a huge improvement over the broken original. But then you get Pokemon remakes that are not so good. Omega Ruby and Alpha Sapphire, in my opinion, were bad remakes that arguably made the original games worse. Like, what did they add to the original Gen 3? What? Better graphics, I guess, and yes, they are better. They still suck. And Gen 6 literally has worse graphics and animations than Pokemon fucking Stadium that was played on a 2001 GameCube or some shit. Yes, let that sink in. The game looks way worse than a game that's played on a console that's even weaker than a PlayStation 1. It's ultimate cringe. Okay, so what else did ORAS add to it? Plot? Nope. The plot is still as brain dead stupid as the original. It's so bad it's almost insulting, like Game Freak literally think that you're mentally stunted or some shit. Having no plot at all would have been better than this dumb shit written by somebody with a million extra chromosomes 5 minutes before the deadline. Like, we love water for some reason, so we need to flood everything. Oh no, the world's getting wrecked. Who would have known that trying to flood everything was a bad idea? The sad thing is I'm not even taking this out of context, so yeah, the plot still sucks. The gameplay? Well, the difficulty was dumbed down even more than the original. You get handed Megalatios, a mon with 700 base stat total that can be easily EV trained, whereas the next gym leader has a flipping Altaria with no EVs at all and base 70 attack. Yeah, nothing more to say there. And yes, while the only real notable improvement was the addition of new features like the physical special split and new moves and such, ROM hacks have made more and better changes like Rising Ruby and Sunken Sapphire. Many mons in ORAS like Sea King and Sunflora are still hot trash, so a lot more could have been done there. Hell, it even removed the Battle Frontier for some reason and replaced it with a story quest that was pretty forgettable. So that's pretty much why I think ORAS were bad remakes. This argument also applies to the upcoming Brilliant Diamond and Shining Pearl remakes. Like, what the hell will they possibly add to the original to justify the remake? So far, we only have a vague trailer to go off, but the one thing that everyone keeps yapping on about is the graphics, and basically judging the whole game off that alone, because they're too dense and ignorant to understand that graphics aren't everything in the game at all. Honestly, I think these new remakes look really underwhelming. Some of the graphics in the backgrounds look pretty good, like houses and water, but everything else looks trash and basically worse than the original. Trainer models look like they came from some mobile games, and battle animations are still non-existent and infinitely worse than a 2001 game, which feels really stupid to say. Despite this, people need to really stop obsessing over graphics to the extent that they do, as it really isn't everything. Final Fantasy VII Remake had incredible graphics, but was still absolute trash. Shining Pearl could have the world's best graphics, and it still won't necessarily make it a good game in its own right. Gen 3 onwards I would say was when the graphics were at least acceptable for Pokemon games, so it's whatever. The original Final Fantasy VII didn't need the fanciest graphics in the world to be as great as it was originally. But this pretty much highlights my main point about these remakes. If the original game was good enough and it still holds up nowadays, why are these remakes even wanted in the first place? And why are people overhyping them? Like, just replay the original if you want to replay Sinnoh. If anything, I think it's more likely not that the remakes will be worse than the original. So at best the remakes will just be a serviceable copy of a game that didn't even need to be remade in the first place, and at worst they'll just take a dump all over it. So graphics aside, what else will there possibly be in the remakes? Well, I highly doubt the plot will change. It'll be just as idiotic as the original, and I know people will disagree with me on this. Pokemon plots have always been non-existently bad compared to other games. I get Black and White 1 had a premise that actually got really nice, albeit the plot only really kicked in at the very end of the game, but to be honest, Black and White 1, though the plot was really nice, it was only really good by Pokemon standards, and it was really underwhelming compared to other games. That's like praising a plot for being better than Tommy Wiseau's The Room. Pokemon standards for plot are really low, so Black and White being much better isn't really saying anything. The main concept of Diamond and Pearl's villain motivations is so bad that it gives Team Aqua and Team Magma a run for their money. And it's so dumb how people praise him. Cyrus is an awful villain. There's literally no good explanation for his motivations in the game, save for like 2 lines of dialogue hidden somewhere. And his motivations literally boil down to, he doesn't like people, so he's going to kill everyone in the universe and make a new one. Like, what the fuck? That's literally it. Unlike the Star Child from Mass Effect 3, who had legitimate and understandable reasons for destroying the world, or Thanos for example, Cyrus's reasons are non-existent, laughable, and so unrelatable. Fanboys claim that he has deep motivations by literally creating paragraphs of made-up headcanon to justify his actions that the game itself should have done in its own. Headcanon is as good as fanfiction, it's bloody worthless. Hell, I even looked at Bulbapedia to try and get something to maybe understand him, and the headcanon on Bulbapedia is so stupid it actually makes his motivations even more spastic than the game. It literally explains that he was a normal guy, but his parents were disappointed in him for some reason. Then he decides that the world is evil because of emotions. Then he decides that the best solution is to literally kill everyone who's ever lived and make himself God. This explanation literally makes his character even more spastic. It's so dumb that he goes from 0 to 1 billion over something so silly. That would be like Thanos killing 50% of the population because he thought it would make a funny meme. It's so ridiculous. Like, what could a remake possibly do to fix this? What? Maybe add like 2 extra lines of dialogue to make it more relatable? Shows a flashback of Cyrus getting cancelled from Twitter, then vowing to unironically blow up the universe as appropriate retaliation because of it? Or something is equally ridiculous? So far, Pokemon remakes have barely expanded on the original plots at all, so it's safe to assume that this will be mostly untouched. Okay, so plot aside, what else? Content? Maybe they could very well add some extra gimmicky minigames and things, maybe some post-game features, but at the same time they could very well remove features, like they could remove the Battle Frontier only to taunt you about it. And yes, people are going to say, oh, but the Battle Frontier was only in Pokemon Platinum though. Well, Platinum was a definitive version of Gen 4, so if the remakes are going to purposely ignore those changes it brought up, then it's purposely just removing stuff from Gen 4 for no reason, which is really dumb. Oh, but I guess we can just wait for the third remake, Pokemon Piss Platinum, to fix those problems, am I right? So the only real improvement I see in these remakes is updated battle mechanics. More mons maybe, new moves and fairy types. Even though ROM hacks like Renegade Platinum already did this years ago, this is the only real big difference I can see with the remakes. Maybe we can get surprised with new regional forms or something, and while people are clickbaiting new mega evolutions on YouTube, I doubt that'd happen, especially depending on whether or not this game is going to be compatible with Gen 8 for trading. And the fact that megas, one of the very few good things that Game Freak have added recently that people actually liked, only to just remove it in favour of worse gimmicks like fucking Dynamax. So yeah, all the stupid reaction videos and clickbait content, people are most likely over-sensationalizing these things, probably for content and views, but honestly, I'm expecting nothing so I won't get disappointed from the remake. So yeah, that's the main point of the video about the remakes, but there's one more thing I want to talk about remakes in general, and that is soundtracks. And I know it's kind of a weird topic, but man, I've got some things to say about this. I absolutely hate it when remakes in general take an original OST that is perfectly good and just bastardize it completely. Remaking soundtracks is good when it's done properly, like here with Final Fantasy II boss theme. Here's the original. And here's the remade version. That is how you remake an OST. Take something that's so dated and flawed and make it work in the modern day. Here's when remaking soundtrack that was perfectly good only makes it worse. Here's the classic Pokemon Platinum OST. Compared to the remake, now this is a recreation of it, but it's identical to what was in the official trailer, so it's suitable to make the comparison here. Here's the classic soundtrack. Great! Now here's the remake version. No offense to PokeLee, but this soundtrack is god-awful, completely ruins the original. The original was great, that main piano beat hits hard and really pulls you into the world, but the remake just ruins it. It changes the instruments to less effective ones, but the real reason why it sucks is because it decides to add in several more instruments and beats on top of the original, making the soundtrack too overcomplicated, as it's literally just throwing more instruments into the kitchen sink that weren't supposed to be there in the first place. This also greatly weakens the main beat from the original, that main piano beat that really pulled you in, which is probably the best part of the song. But now, because there's so much other shit going on in that song, it's literally just drowned in the sauce. This is like taking the Mona Lisa and deciding to add floating houses to the background because you want to add more stuff to it and you think adding more stuff makes it better, which it really doesn't. Another example, here's a Final Fantasy X remade battle theme. Notice how it's got so much shit going on, it feels really incoherent and messy compared to the original. Here's the original. So much better. It's way simpler and way more effective. It focuses on the main beat, the one that really matters, and it really pumps you up. Instead of 5 shitty soundtracks playing at the same time, adding shit doesn't always make something better. Now, here's a case where a remake is actually better than the original. Final Fantasy III Elia OST, the original. Notice how, despite being extremely dated, it's still a pretty catchy theme. That's because the structure of the song itself is actually pretty well done and catchy. It's basically 2 slow beats playing, and that's it. And it still manages to feel emotional. The only real issue with this song is that the instruments are some 1980s garage band shit. Really dated. But here's the remade version. Now, that is an improvement. Excellent song, much more emotional than the original. Notice that unlike the bad examples, this example, it keeps the simplicity of the original song intact. It's still the exact same structure with 2 slow beats playing, and only that. Just, they're played with more effective instruments instead, making it a faithful adaptation that actually improves on the original. This is what makes a good OST remake, and if the OST in question is something like Cynthia's boss theme from the original Platinum or Final Fantasy VII original battle theme, where the soundtrack is already perfect as it is, then why change it? Why remake it? Why try to mess with it? To attempt to fix a piece of art that's already perfect is only going to make it worse. A better alternative is to just not remake it and instead make something new, like Final Fantasy 15. Yes, that game was flawed, but the soundtracks were all completely new and the soundtracks were probably one of the better parts of that game. And this is the closing point of the video. If the original game did not need a remake, then why is it done? 'Cause money, of course. The real problem at the end of the day is not necessarily the game developers, but the fans. They're the ones responsible for the BS that happens in their favourite franchises. Fanboys that are basically just yes men that always defend stupid shit that happens because they're fanboyism. The community only started calling out Pokemon at Gen 8, but really, Pokemon had always done shady shit like purposely creating problems to sell you the fixes, taking way too long to fix even the most basic issues like HMs which should have been fixed in Gen fucking 2, and much more. Thankfully, the Final Fantasy community has been knocked out of their fanboyism, and they're actually starting to turn against the Final Fantasy VII Remake for being such a humongous disappointment that was also falsely advertised. Pokemon fans need to stop group thinking or blindly accepting anything Game Freak gives them. Think for yourselves and make up your own mind. Don't get drowned in the hype. At the end of the day, I really don't give a damn about Gen 4 remakes, because the definitive Gen 4 experience is already here, and it's the ROM hack Pokemon Renegade Platinum. This is my remake.